Hello and good morning, everybody. We welcome you. As usual, we're going to wait for another 2 minutes so everybody arrives, everybody's set up for the webinar. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on quantifying the impact, addressing energy poverty through efficiency. My name is Christina Eisfeld, and I will guide you through today's morning webinar. And during today's meeting, some rules of the webinar. Please make sure your microphone is muted. And as always, we encourage you to ask questions. So please use the chat function, or you can also always raise your hand after the presentations to be asked to be unmuted, also for verbal questions. And as we know from past webinars, it's quite interactive and there are a lot of questions, so don't hesitate to ask. For technical support, please address all technical questions to Roberta and also to me in the chat. And very important today is because we have, I think, very technical questions and technical presentations today. It will be recorded, and in some weeks you will receive the video on the website. And also a side note, don't forget to join our newsletter. So we will also have the recordings available through our newsletter. Okay, without further ado, our agenda for today. We will have the Odyssey Muir database with Samuele from ICT, who will present harnessing the energy efficiency progress for energy poverty. So we will delve into that. After 50 minutes, Florin from the Wuppertal Institute will present another tool called the Seed MICAT tool, and is also focusing on energy poverty there. Afterwards, we're gonna hear the results from our RENOVERTY project and the application of the DREAM model by Akis from the TES Lab from Greece. And then last but not least, Tonia from Singular Logic will present the Inherit project, where they focus on cultural buildings. And then we will still have some time for the discussion and some conclusions. And at 11:30, we aim to close the webinar for today. So we have a dense program. I hope everybody is set up to be informed today. And Samuele, I'm gonna
Thank you,
give you the
Chrissy.
floor.
Thank you. So yeah, my name is Samuele Livraghi. I work at the Institute for European Energy and Climate Policy, and today we'll present you some main takeaways from the Odysseymir project. Here on the screen, you can get access both to the Odyssey database, for which you would have to register to access, but we've checked and regional agency can ask to register for free and still get access to all the databases and indicator of the Odyssey, and then you can also access MUR, which is the main topic of my presentation today, what I've been mainly working on in Odyssey MUR and what I'll be talking about. So if we can go to the next slide, today I'll give you a bit of an overview of what we've been doing with MUR, especially in regards to energy poverty. Starting from a small literature review from RAP, the Regulatory System Project. I will also present some key policy changes that we've observed in this field, what are current approaches in granting financial support for increased energy efficiency, and how does this, of course, relate to energy poverty. And then in the last moments of the presentation, I'll go through some functionalities of MUR that you might find interesting. Next slide, please. So the moment that you would access the MUR database, this is what you're presented with. You could put in text to search some specific measures based on some specific words or a topic that you might want to address. You can search measure for the country or for the sector. But if you just want to have a look at all the energy poverty measures, you would tap on more options and then select the energy poverty check. And next slide. And because like through this, then you would also be redirected to basically the two main types of reporting for energy poverty measures in MUR. So you will get access to the measures that aim mainly or exclusively at targeting and tackling energy poverty. So these are meant to directly alleviate the conditions and causes of energy poverty in the affected households. How is this done? These measures do focus on priority groups, and some specific examples might be dedicated energy assistance programs, subsidies for energy efficient appliances for low-income households, or other vulnerable groups. And then next slide, you can also go and check the measures, including an important component addressing energy poverty. So they're mainly, of course, energy efficiency measures, but they include elements or provision related to energy poor households or other priority groups. Some measures such as this would be like higher grant rates for low-income households in general renovation programs, promoting energy efficiency in social housing, general energy advice services, but free for vulnerable households, and so on. Now, next slide, please. In MUR, we have roughly 130 measures coded under energy poverty. Logically, you'd see that most of them apply to the households, because yeah, but interestingly enough, we also see some measures related to services, and what I find particularly interesting is the ones that now refer to transport poverty, which we know that in the social climate plan regulation takes a different level of importance. Next slide, please. So by doing this kind of work on reporting energy poverty measures in MUR, we were able to basically double check what policy changes have been observed both in literature and academia, and to kind of confirm these trends and these changes in the measures that we've observed being uploaded in the database. So, for example, there is a clear shift in approach, which is also supported by the Commission on different level, which is from short-term bill support to long-term solution. So, of course, we're not negating at all the need for immediate financial support, but there should be something that builds a longer and better lasting strategy. And this happens through investments in energy efficiency and renewable energy to reduce households' reliance on fossil fuels. Four categories that I think are very important to point out from a study from the Regulatory Assistance Project, which are aspects that I like to use in reading and going through all these measures, are the protection for vulnerable households, which is clear, financial and technical support, representation of such affected groups in the policymaking process, and then coherent implementation across national and local levels. And now I'll show you some examples. If you can go to the next slide. When we talk about, thank you. When we talk about prioritizing vulnerable households, we need to make sure that the budget for certain measures is ring-fenced only to apply to these low-income or vulnerable population or priority groups that we are trying to help out. And two examples that I liked from, available from the NEAR database were the subsidy for replacing fossil fuel heating systems in Austria, which are available to households in the lowest income deciles. And of course, there are different levels of eligibility based on income threshold and size and location of the households. And also another measure that is directly aiming at supporting vulnerable population is in Belgium, the prevention to disconnection and debt management through households being switched to a minimum supply of energy without being cut off, basically. Next slides. Next slide, please. And yeah, so there are some also different approaches that are more inclusive to the contexts in which measures need to apply. For example, in Spain, retrofitting projects have been happening in low-income neighborhoods, and they can receive subsidies of up to 100%. In Malta, the vulnerable household scheme allows local authorities to identify and refer vulnerable households for targeted support to social services. And next slide. And if you can go, yeah. And through these varied approaches, we can see that, of course, there are levels of implementation and of action that do support people in vulnerable households in a better way. And as I was saying before, finding mechanisms like dedicated budgets for low-income households and pre-financing to reduce upfront costs, but also access to energy efficiency programs through simplified application processes and area-specific targeting. These should all be aspects that are taken into consideration when drawing up energy efficiency policies with a look at energy poverty. And an example of this is the Croatia's energy efficiency obligation scheme, which focuses on improving energy efficiency in underdeveloped areas to assist households at risk of energy poverty. Moving on to the next slide. Now I'll just show you a bit of functionalities of the website. For example, on your, you can decide to select some criteria of evaluation for the energy efficiency measures that you might be interested to, and and then these successful measures are evaluated and graded per country. Or if you go to the next slides, on your, you can also assess and visualize which indicator would correspond to selected policies, so that you can also help use this tool to help yourself in quantifying the impact or understanding what indicators you need to use to see the effect of such a measures. And lastly, next slide, please. The energy efficiency scoreboard, which is basically a collection of energy efficiency indicators and policies, and these indicators or policies are scored on the energy efficiency levels, on the efficiency progress, on the policies that apply to this progress, and then they are evaluated per country. So this would be my part of the presentation. If you have any question, I'm here for 5 more minutes, yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Samuele. We have some time right now for some ad hoc questions, but you can also just raise the questions also later in the discussion. But if somebody has some burning questions to Samuele, because I know he's a little bit sick, I don't know if he will stay up until to the discussion. So thank you so much for being at all here with us now. Somebody? Okay. If not, we're gonna move on to Florin. To Seed Me Cat. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Christina. And thank you all for joining today and provide me the opportunity to present our work here. I will talk a little bit about the MICAT approach and how we quantify energy poverty impacts from energy efficiency improvement. Next slide, please. Okay, it's a double slide. So before I go into the nitty-gritty of the methodology, I would just quickly like to recap the background of why are we doing the MICAT project and the MICAT tool as the main outflow from this. So it revolves around the concept of multiple impacts of energy efficiency. Most of you might have seen this flower graph on the right side. Which depicts all the additional impacts and benefits of energy efficiency beyond the traditional environmental impacts of greenhouse gas savings and cost savings and so forth. So these have been around and been discussed for the last 10 years and are often also implicitly considered in energy efficiency measures, but rarely reported and also not considered in comprehensive cost-benefit analysis. So what the MICAT tool is trying to do is to make the full set of advantages of energy efficiency policy measures more transparent and monetize them and aggregate them to allow for more comprehensive cost-benefit analysis of energy efficiency, and thus also to promote their the arguments in policy making. So this has also been picked up by the European Commission more and more, also in the policy making, such as the EPPD and the ED, but also requires member states increasingly to report on these multiple impacts in the national energy and climate plans. And more recently, with the latest recast of the Energy Efficiency Directive, also there's a requirement to use it within the implementation of the Energy Efficiency First Principle, so to consider the wider benefits of energy efficiency when doing a weighting between energy-related investments and alternative energy efficiency options. Next slide, please. So the MICAT project is trying to address this need of reporting the multiple impacts, and we have developed a tool that can help policymakers, but also other stakeholders really to assess what is the impact, the full impact of energy efficiency actions or scenarios. And by doing this, we built on already existing work of the COMBI project and Odyssey Mur, the MBE tool, and we brought together this knowledge and created this new tool, which is the MICAT tool. So, and one aim of this exercise was, on the one hand, to improve the scientific knowledge on the matter and the methods that can be used to quantify the multiple impacts, but more relevant also to support policymakers in their assessment of multiple impacts and to allow to use their own use cases to assess the multiple impacts and have a simple way of quantifying and monetizing different impacts across different categories, including social, economic, and environmental. And today we'll talk more about the potential of energy efficiency to reduce energy poverty and how we go on about it. Next slide, please. So this quickly shows the general logic behind the MICAT approach, which is allowing for the open data entry and requires users to provide some basic data, mostly around energy savings by country, energy carrier, and sector, but also can choose what kind of measures they intend to promote with their policy or implement. And in the middle of this graph, you see the quantification chain, which is really at the core of what the MICA tool is doing. So starting from this input data of users, we apply impact factors or simple functions to firstly translate that into physical units or impacts in terms of physical units. So we apply all kinds of indicators for the different impacts in order to quantify the effect. Then for those where it is possible, these impacts are monetized. In this step, we try to avoid double counting, so only those that are not overlapping are monetized, and then aggregated to allow for a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis of different policy measures or scenarios. Next slide, please. So the focus of today's presentation is how we go on about quantifying the energy poverty alleviation impacts of policies. So in order to enable that, we rely on expenditure-based metrics of energy poverty, which you might be familiar with. On one hand, the M2 indicator that is capturing underspending of households, and on the other hand, the 2M indicator, which is capturing relative overspending, always in relation to how the energy expenditure is distributed in the respective countries. And with the tool, you can do an estimation of energy poverty impacts of both building and household targeted energy efficiency improvement actions. So with the first, for instance, it's an insulation activity, and second could be more like a appliance replacement program. The tool then also differentiates between tenants and owners if you try to assess the impact of building focused measures, because clearly there's a difference in terms of where the costs and the benefits will end up if you have a building renovation, whether you're an owner or a tenant. In order to make it also more realistic, the tool adjusts the yearly household energy cost savings with view to the possible subsidies that are provided by a program or a policy, or in the case of a tenants, considers the rent increases, so based on a percentage of the current rent of energy poor households. So the basic concept is that we look at these net cost savings that the households will get from the energy efficiency improvements and put them in relation to the household's absolute or relative energy expenditure, and how it relates to the energy poverty threshold. So on the left side, you see a graph that tries to exemplify this a bit. Next, please. You see, this is the exemplary distribution of energy expenditure. So if we look at the M2 indicator, and what we are modeling within the tool is how the net energy cost savings help the households that are labeled energy poor, according to this indicator, how it helps them to increase their energy expenditure beyond the energy poverty threshold, so to enable them to increase their energy expenditure. Next, please. So again, what is required as a user input? It's the minimum is the final energy savings in the residential buildings, but also it can be further so to say, make it more detailed to get more precise estimates if also investment costs are entered, or the number of energy efficiency improvement actions. And then further details can be provided in terms of what is the policy targeting of a specific program or policy. So what share of these actions is then actually implemented in energy poor households, and what is the state subsidy for these actions that are being implemented. And the last point, very relevant, is to what extent are the investments of building owners passed on to tenants by in terms of rent increases. And within the MICA tool, we also have a variety of background data, so also to enable the use of the tool for those who do not have this kind of information at hand. So we use default values and to still provide output from the tool. Next slide, please. So the quantification approach is starts from the user input of the energy savings and then consists of 3 main steps. At first, next please. The first step, the type and number of energy efficiency improvement actions are defined and then monetized and adjusted, as I said before, for rent increase, but also for subsidies and so forth to achieve the net energy cost savings per household in a year. Next, please. The next step is then related to the targeting of the policy. So what share of these improvement actions are implemented in energy poor households? So this is determined by a factor between 0 and 100%. And next, please. The final step and most important is then to estimate the impact in terms of energy poverty alleviation. And this relates to what I said before, how far the net energy cost savings per households exceed the energy poverty gap, so the distance from households to the energy poverty threshold. So here there's an impact factor that we apply, and this can also take on the values between 0 and 1, obviously. So 0.5 would mean that 50% of the households who benefit from the energy efficiency improvement actions are then lifted from energy poverty. Next slide, please. So this is just to reiterate the central concept behind our methodology. On the one hand, the energy poverty gaps, as I said, is the distance of individual households, absolute or relative energy expenditure, to the energy poverty threshold of their respective indicator. And then the other central concept is the impact factor, which shows what share of the benefiting households is then lifted from energy poverty. And on the right-hand side, I showed you the energy poverty gap distribution in Italy for the M2 indicator. So as you can see on the left hand, these are the households, or the decile of the households that are less severely energy poor according to the indicator. On the right-hand side, in the 9th and 10th decile, you can see the distance of the energy spending from the energy poverty threshold. So here it's about 720 euros. Next slide, please. So to make it a little bit more plastic, if we assume an energy efficiency policy or a program that is generating yearly energy cost savings of 600 euros per household in a year, so it's quite a good one. And then we assume that it needs to be adjusted for investment costs or rent increase. So not all of the benefits end up within the households, then 200 euro of net energy cost savings remain. And you can see here that I inserted these into this distribution of the energy poverty gap, and you can see, next slide, please. And you can see that for 50%, so the first 5 deciles of the energy poverty gap distribution, this is sufficient to allow them to theoretically increase their energy expenditure beyond the energy poverty threshold. And for the other ones, it's not sufficient, but back please. For the others, it's not sufficient, but it still helps them, well, to mitigate the situation of energy poverty they're in. And last slide, please. So after this introduction, I would like to quickly go on about the main assumptions underlying our approach and the limitations, and also what's coming next. So clearly, one very or debatable assumption is that this addition in disposable household income is then sufficient to lift households from energy poverty. So there's a lot of uncertainty involved in that. Of course, there are other areas for investment or for consumption, such as basic needs related to food, housing, transport, and so forth. But nevertheless, that is one main underlying assumption here in this approach. And then the other assumptions, they are the result of a lack of data, really. But this is also to make this transparent. When we apply the measures or the energy efficiency improvements, we assume an equal distribution of building renovations to different building types. So it's not differentiated by single, double, or multi-family buildings, which is quite a strong assumption, I'd say, considering that this also reflects a financial ability to actually invest in building renovation. A second one is that we assume a proportional distribution of the building renovations among owner-occupiers and tenants. So considering the whole split incentives dilemma, this is also quite a strong assumption. But as I said, again, it's also mostly data-driven. And lastly, when looking at building renovations, we assume that the investment costs and the energy cost savings, so costs and benefits, are also equally distributed among building occupants. Next, please. So in terms of the data issues that I outlined, for one, we rely on the harmonized household budget survey data. And as many of you know who work with this data, there's kind of a time lag in which the Eurostat is providing the harmonized data. So we're always a bit like 5 years behind. So it's not very up to date, so to say, not as up to date as it could be. Then when we look at different use cases, there's an option also to look at subnational programs, but there's for hardly any region there's subnational data available. So we use the national values as proxies, and so for those who use this on a regional level, they should probably consider replacing our values with their own. Another major data gap is the data on rent premiums. So what share of investments in tenant buildings is passed on via increased rent? So there's a lot of information for commercial buildings, but very little on this aspect. So it is also user adjustable, but at the moment we are operating with the 4% passed on. And lastly,
Florin, could you please speed up a little bit?
Yes, of course. This is the last points. Sorry. Yeah, and last. Okay, I can. This is very technical. Please next. Just looking forward, what we're working on now in the CMICAT is then also to look at the impacts of renewable deployment. So as the other part of the climate neutrality scenarios. And also looking forward, we're thinking about expanding the indicators that could be quantified with. So sorry for taking a bit longer, and thank you for your attention.
Ah, wow. Now, very, very good, Florian. Thank you. You really came to now quickly to the end. Well, perfect. Somebody has some ad hoc questions to Florian. Something burning that you want to ask. Maria asked, what is energy and rent expenditure? Maybe this one quickly to you.
Yeah, from Jean-Sebastian?
No,
yes.
From
sorry.
Maria. What is energy and rent expenditure? Probably
what it is.
Probably she's asking about the operationalization.
Okay, so yeah, this is basically taken from the household budget survey data. So it has a combined energy expenditure variable. So and rent is also taken from this data. So maybe I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly, but this is basically the data source. Yeah, this is the household budget
the data
survey.
source.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody, and good morning. My name is Akis Apostoliotis, and I am a research associate at the Techno-Economics of Energy System Laboratory at the University of Piraeus. My presentation will focus on the evaluation of energy efficiency measures, addressing the needs of households experiencing energy poverty in rural contexts. Next slide, please. First of all, I would like to make a quick introduction regarding the RENOVERTY project. The issue of energy poverty has been widely discussed in the European policy dialogue, but there are still several gaps in knowledge and practice around energy poverty in rural areas. These gaps are even more pronounced in rural areas in Central Eastern, Southern Eastern, and Southern Europe, which are areas that are usually left behind in the energy transition. Next slide, please. To address these gaps, RENOVERTY aims to create a set of renovation roadmaps aiming at those regions. And these roadmaps are co-created with the support of local action groups, and RENOVERTY also aims to deliver a scalable model to support the replication of these rural energy efficiency roadmaps. Next slide, please. To achieve this goal, RENOVERTY worked on the update of the framework of energy poverty in rural areas through several activities: literature reviews, assessment of stakeholders, viewpoints and needs, the development of an indicator, and also it identified the specificities of the rural building stock. This was achieved through more than 85 energy audits conducted in the 7 pilot countries of the project. This, coupled with the co-creation process, aided in the development of the renovation roadmaps. Next slide, please. So this approach created a need for the evaluation of energy efficiency measures for those households that are experiencing energy poverty in rural areas of the region. Our evaluation was mainly based on 2 criteria: the energy saving potential of the energy efficiency measures and their cost effectiveness. A comprehensive analysis of this evaluation can be found in the latest RENOVERTY report, which can be found by scanning this QR. Next slide, please. So, in this context, the energy efficiency measures were evaluated in the 7 countries of RENOVERTY: Croatia, Estonia, Hungary, Slovenia, Italy, Portugal, and Spain, for 13 distinct building typologies. Next slide, please. To perform this evaluation, we used the DREAM model, an energy demand simulation model targeting the building sector, which is also applied and developed in several Horizon and LIFE projects. Next slide. So the DREAM model is a component and component-based and modular structured model that has flexibility, which is connected to precise calculations with increased computational efficiency. Next slide, please. So let's see what is the required data for the parameterization of the DREAM model. The first necessary input concerns weather and climate data, which we acquired from the World Meteorological Organization in the form of typical meteorological years sorry, for several regions in the pilot countries of RENOVERTY. Next slide, please. Then a crucial input concerns building parameters, which we acquired from the energy audits conducted as part of the RENOVERTY project. Next slide. And lastly, again from the energy audits, we acquired data for the occupancy and activity profiles of the residents of the dwellings. Next slide, please. So, after determining the baseline and the energy efficiency measures, we used the model to evaluate the performance and the replicability potential of the energy efficiency measures that could include heating technology changes, like the substitution of fossil fuel boilers, and we use several metrics in order to evaluate them, like cost effectiveness. The outcomes aim to assist in the development of the rural energy efficiency roadmaps and also provide policymakers and consumers with useful insights. Next slide, please. So, what were the results of the simulations? Next slide. In order to briefly dive into the results, I would like to briefly present the outcomes for the single-family house typology in the pilot region of Osona. Here we can see some of the key characteristics we used for this case study. Next slide, please. So the first set of results generated concerned the baseline situation of the typology, which includes information about the total energy consumption and how this is divided to cover the different needs of the household. We can see that in the pilot of Osona, the total energy consumption is over 31,000 kilowatt hours per year, and more than 90% of this consumption is used to cover the heating needs of the dwelling. Next slide, please. So, using the insights from the energy audits and the baseline scenario, we determined the energy efficiency measures to be studied for this case. In the pilot of Osona, there were measures that targeted envelope upgrades, like exterior wall or roof insulations, and other measures that targeted heating technology changes, like the installation of a more efficient boiler or the installation of a heat pump. Next slide, please. After determining the energy efficiency measures to be studied, the first set of results concerns the annual energy savings achieved from the implementation of those measures. We observe that in this case, the highest energy reduction is achieved with the installation of a heat pump, and as far as the envelope upgrades are concerned, the highest reduction is achieved with the exterior wall insulation. Next slide, please. The next set of results concern the annual emissions and how these are, what is the reduction connected to each of the energy efficiency measures. Here we can see that heating technology changes lead to superior performance in comparison to the other measures, also highlighting the importance of using efficient heating systems. Next slide, please. All of the generated results were also coupled with a techno-economic assessment, focusing mainly on three key indicators: the net present value, payback period, and levelized cost of saved energy. Given that our study is also targeting energy poor households, and households experiencing energy poverty, it is important also to consider the economic performance and impact of those measures to gain a more comprehensive overview of the benefits generated for the households. Next slide, please. In order to achieve this, we also compared the annual energy saving potential of the different studied measures with their cost effectiveness using the levelized cost of saved energy. We can see that in this case, the installation of a heat pump showcases significant energy savings coupled with a low LCSE. Actually, here the area we are targeting is the upper left, where we have a high amount of annual energy savings coupled with a low levelized cost. Next slide, please. Furthermore, we investigated the impact of financial support in the form of subsidies for the renovation costs of the different studied measures. Here, let's see about the exterior wall insulation. We can see that a 25% subsidy rate increases the profitability by a factor of 36% and also lowers the payback period by 4 years. If we double the subsidy rate, then we have an increase in the net present value for exterior wall insulation by 71%, and the payback period is lowered by 7.5 years. It is important also to mention that the impact of subsidies is also more pronounced in pilot regions where measures does not offer sufficient incentives for households to renovate. Here we can see that we have positive MPVs, so this can motivate households to renovate more easily than in other cases. Next slide, please. Okay, after this brief discussion about the single-family house typology in the pilot of Osona, I would like to mention some general trends that we observed throughout the pilots. Across all the pilot cases, the installation of heat pumps offers significant energy saving, but in some cases, their economic performance is strongly impacted by the local energy prices. As far as envelope upgrades are concerned, these are strongly influenced by the building characteristics, the renovation costs, which vary among the different EU countries, and of course, the heating technology utilized in the baseline situation. Generally, exterior wall insulation showcases the greatest variability in terms of energy saving potential, while roof insulation has the most consistent performance. Next slide, please. In conclusion, simulation results highlighted the importance of accurately determining the baseline scenario to have consistent results about the benefits of the different energy efficiency measures. In addition, our analysis indicate the need to prioritize areas with greater inefficiencies with a custom way in order to address the specific needs of each region. Last but not least, our analysis underlies the need for financial support in several cases in order to achieve the highest possible household profitability. Of course, a thorough analysis of all the simulation results can be found in the latest RENOVERTY report, which also fed into the creation of the rural energy efficiency roadmaps. And next slide, please. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Great, thank you, Akis. I'm seeing also in the chat an ad hoc question, I would say, to you. So I think it was the case for Osona in the practical example. In the 90% of the energy needs due to heating, does it include domestic hot water or space heating only? It's a very specialized question.
In this case, I recall that it is only about the space heating.
Okay, good. Some other ad hoc questions. Otherwise, the other question I will take for the discussion later that is raised already in the chat. There were also some observations. Maybe for somebody it was a bit too fast. I don't know. Maybe somebody wants to rekindle that. Okay, perfect. Great, Tonya. I think then the floor is yours. Very curious to hear about that project.
Thank you, Christina. Hi, everyone. I'm Antonia Brandi. I'm from Singular Logic, project manager and the coordinators of the Inherit project. So next slide, please. Today, I will give you a short overview of the Inherit, mainly focusing on the aim, its methodology, and an overview of the solutions that are being developed and the ones that are mostly developed related to energy efficiency. Next slide, please. So what Inherit is about? Inherit offers a methodology that will make historic buildings more sustainable, accessible, and energy efficient while maintaining their cultural heritage value. And this methodology, next slide please, will be applied, demonstrated and validated in 8 cultural heritage sites across the EU. You can see Spain, France, Sweden, Poland, Latvia, Croatia, Turkey, and Greece. Next slide, please. So this methodology is divided in 3 layers. The social, the scientific, and the technological, and inherent methodology is also in line with the new European Bauhaus principles. And now I will present some of the key takeaways for each of these layers. So let's get started with the social layer. Next slide, please. Which is based in the social sciences and the humanities to produce research evidence and real-world impact. This layer also includes the multi-stakeholder approach to point out the needs and interests of the different related stakeholders. Could be building owners, residents, and so on. And of course, the co-creation process, which is based on the social labs and multi-stakeholder forums. Next slide, please. Some of the most important results for, let's say, the first year of Inherit project. It's the completion of 7 social labs. And some of the key findings are also some of the key challenges that have arisen through these social labs. Some challenges in implementing new technologies, financial and bureaucratic barriers, the balance of energy efficiency with heritage conservation, and so on. The next one is the multi-stakeholder forum that took place in event that took place in online in September, where more than 250 stakeholders were reached to be invited. 92 of them were registered, where more than 69 participated during the online event. And 6 well-known speakers had their presentation. During this event, we had collected 46 questions that will be added to the Inherit info desk. Next milestone is the completion of 2 workshops for the co-design of the Inherit solutions. During the first one, we have identified the user requirements along with the stakeholders, and the second one, we received feedback on the front-end design. And as I said, since the Inherit is in line with the new European Bauhaus, we also had 2 workshops in September and October. Next slide, please. The scientific layer. In the scientific layer, we aim to set up a European common approach to achieve a balance between sustainable building performance and heritage values preservation. We're developing an assessment and monitoring framework to evaluate the cultural heritage sites. And of course, we are creating the hub of measures to define affordable and viable solutions to renovate heritage buildings. Let's see the results now of the scientific layer. During this phase of the first release of the Inherit Assessment Monitoring Framework, we had the technical inspection, which emphasizes the structural safety and integrity of the building, beginning with the foundation and structure to prevent collapse and ensure user safety. And as you may see in this pyramid, then the facades and roofs come as second most important, and so on. As said, we had the first release of the assessment and monitoring framework, which is divided in 4 pillars: the energy and comfort, the sustainability and accessibility, the climate resilience, and the circularity pillars. And this framework, let's say, that's been translated into a web tool. As you may see in the 3rd box, we have here a screenshot of a test building that we implemented the KPIs of a building cultural heritage buildings, and here you can see the results in the 4 pillars. And the hub of measures, we have collected 83 measures, where 37 of them can be applied in cultural heritage with high level of protection. Next slide, please. The technological layer. In the Inherit project, we are developing 11 services, which are divided in 4 key areas: the data collection and sharing, the design and renovation, the monitoring, operation and management, and the preservation and maintenance layer. Next slide, please. So on this table, you can see on the first column the 4 categories that the services are divided. The second column indicates the services, and then you can see their relation to each pilot site. The first one, Service 0, which is the smartification and data exchange platform, is applied in all of the pilot sites. And in this orange boxes that are, let's say, highlighted, these are the services that I will describe, let's say, today. So next slide, please. So in the environmental quality and comfort optimization, this service aims to assess and improve indoor environmental quality, balancing occupant comfort with historic preservation and energy efficiency. Its functionalities are the real-time monitoring, historical analysis, and insights and improvement recommendations. And these, with this tool, let's say, you may have different Next slide, please.
Sonia, you were just abruptly gone for 1 second. Maybe you can repeat the last sentence.
Yeah, I realized.
Please.
I said that with this tool, you have the ability to have different rooms, to access different rooms in the same building. Next slide, please. Service 5, energy forecasting and data-driven intelligent management. This service aims to enhance the energy management by using advanced forecasting models and intelligent load shifting to optimize energy efficiency, indoor environmental quality, and thermal comfort. Similar functionalities as the previous one: real-time monitoring, historical analysis, energy forecasting, and optimization scheduling to enhance the energy management and efficiency in buildings. And the last one, which is the digital twin for heritage facilities, real-time monitoring and management. The digital twin is a virtual replica of the cultural heritage building, and it is used to provide meaningful information about the cultural heritage operation and management, energy and comfort of the users of the building, and of course for the maintenance of the building. The functionalities are the remote inspection and visualization. The user can identify areas for improvement and quantify saving potentials. Also, the user can find scenario simulation and what-if analysis, support preventive maintenance, and data visualization. Next slide, please. Our next steps. So at the moment, we are just concluding the second round of social labs. They will be concluded by the end of January, marking an important step forward. And this step will pave the way to new tests and the quantification of impact for the pilots, enabling us to measure and refine their effectiveness. And thank you for your, here is the consortium. We are 18 partners from all over Europe, and Singular Logic is the coordinator. And if you have any questions, I am available.
Great.
Of course, you can visit our website and subscribe to our newsletter.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Wow, I think all the 4 presentations, you did really all a really great work. I'm very impressed. I would open the discussion. Somebody maybe has direct questions to Antonia. Please feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hands. Somebody has some questions to the project. Maybe I can start off with one question. What I just noted. You were telling as well about, or I saw it in one of the slides, I think at the beginning, that you're using also AI tools and Internet of Things and augmented reality. I was just wondering, out of curiosity, how is it used? What kind of tools there are you using specifically?
I guess this for me, right?
Yeah.
This service one that you're referring to, Christina. So the plan is, how it's developed up till now. This service is that we have the building, let's say in virtual, in visual, the cultural heritage building, let's say the first pilot. And in this building, you can choose different scenarios, and you can see them before and after of the building, before the renovation and after the renovation, let's say, how it will look like. And of course, now we have it in like a demo on a video, let's say, but the users can actually use the headset and have a look on the, they can actually decide on different scenarios that we have added to this tool, and they can see the before and after and some suggestions, let's say, of the buildings. Maybe I can give you an example that one of the buildings, they used to have, let's say, balconies, but then on the after they are removed because of some reason, let's say, just a simple example.
Wow, a completely new user experience, kind of. Very nice.
It's
cool.
very interesting, yes.
Yes. That's very great. I would go to one of the questions in the chat, maybe. Okay, the other one is to Akis.
Yes.
How do you distinguish and calculate the cooling demand?
Okay, in addition, I see another question aiming at me from Jean Sebastian, and I will try to answer both of them in,
True.
in one question, in one
Perfect.
answer, sorry. So, in this application, we used the data we got from the energy audits in the pilot areas in order to calibrate the model and to align it with those information. With this information, and then each aspect of the energy demand calculated is based on different components of the model. For example, we have set points for cooling and heating, and actually considering outdoor and indoor temperature, when these set points are met, the heating or cooling system works.
Perfect. Thank you, Akis. Jean-Sebastian, please just say if that answered your question. And Yorgos, I think that was from Yorgos that you also just answered, I hope. I was just also wondering, Akis, as you may know, the heating pump prices are different between the pilots, right? Is it taken into account because the price of the heating pump also depends on the region where you are? That was also another question that I had during your presentation.
Yeah, actually, one of the most important findings is that each region actually must focus on doing such a procedure, such a study, because the economic situation is really different for each of the pilot countries. And this does not only affect heat pumps. We saw that the situation was really similar in envelope upgrades. For example, there were pilots where the price for insulating was really lower than others, and in other pilots that was a really pricey endeavor. So you have to actually see the measures in the context of its area.
Yeah. Makes sense. Can you give an example where the differences were the most extreme? Do you have an example out now for us? Do you remember?
I would say that one interesting thing and we got from if I recall correctly was from Slovenia. It was that actually some measures are 100% subsidized by authorities, and in this case this changes the background a lot, because you have to see what is the change in the running cost of its technology and how the reduction in consumption changes the gains from its and the benefits from its measure.
Okay. Florian, you are unmuted yourself. No. Did you want to ask something? Sorry, No. Okay, perfect. Somebody else has another question, or I don't know if that was already also answered. Is the dream model calibrated based on metered data? Akis?
Yes, that's actually part of my first answer. The model was calibrated based for this application based on the data from the audits.
Okay. And if I'm just staying with you just for a second right now, I guess because it's fitting, can you also maybe elaborate on how you included the occupancy profile and the activity profiles? You were going in the climate zone and so on, but can you elaborate on that maybe a little bit for the audience?
Yes, actually, we distributed the sets of, let's say, Excels that had some data for us, some extra data. And among those was some information about the activity and the occupancy of the residents, how many residents, what time they were at home, and when were they at work, if we had any elderly people or children, and we are also asked for information regarding the consumption, not only from the audits but from utility, from the utility perspective, how much what was the cost for apply and use ads and things like that.
Great,
Thank
great. Okay, thank you. Maybe, is there another question asked? If not, I can just continue as well, because I noted many questions. Florine, can I ask you another question? How did you quantify actually the social benefits? You were going into the energy poverty explanation, but I saw as well that you're looking as well at health, right? And quality of life or well-being, I noted. So can you go into that maybe? Or not really?
I can try. It has been my duty to do this, but we quantified the health benefits mostly in terms of avoided winter mortality on the one hand, and the other one was decrease in morbidity, mostly related to asthma. So this also related to mostly, well, only to building renovation activities. And then for the asthma indicator, looked at the population attributable factors. So this is basically what share of an indication of asthma is related to bad indoor quality and how this can be improved by improving the building envelope and the indoor climate quality. So the other social welfare, this was with the colleague from E3M, so I'm not really able to speak on it in more detail, unfortunately.
I'm just curious how you really quantified it. Like, how do you come from A to B?
From A to B.
Maybe it's.
I'm not sure I can
discuss
answer
it
this satisfyingly at the moment, but I can advise to go to the MICAT website. We have fact sheets on each of the indicators that are being quantified within the project, and they are really detailed layout how we went on about it. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Perfect. Yeah, don't worry. I will go and read it. I think as we have predominantly audience who's focusing on energy poverty, some people would also ask or are interested, Florine, why did you choose these two indicators? The over and understanding. It's a common question, I think, but maybe you can explain how did you end up with these two?
Yeah, I mean, the rationale is quite straightforward. I mean, these are the ones that are most commonly mentioned also in the legislation and legislative pieces by the European Commission and also used by the Energy Poverty Observatory. And we were looking at also different indicators, more consensual ones that are also or more commonly used even in the application in the member states. But the problem always was, of course, how to translate then the energy efficiency improvements to an impact in terms of energy poverty alleviation. So at the end of the day, we were looking more into something numerical, knowing about the limitations of this approach. I mean, it's not just a monetary issue, but yeah, since the tool is built around energy savings as the main input from users, and this is quite easily translated into energy cost savings, then at the end of the day, we decided to go with expenditure-based indicators. But as I said at the end of of my presentation, we're also looking into including additional indicators, something that is used, for instance, in the CCAPs of the communities. They also have to report then on energy poverty, and they have a different kind of indicator with more of a share of income spent on energy. So this is also something that we can calculate and put in the data, so people can choose more freely what kind of indicator they want to use to estimate the energy poverty impact.
Okay, thank you very much. And so very practical question, Florine. When is the tool ready and when can it be used?
It's been a long time coming. I'd say it is ready at this point. There's always some tweaks and things because it's a complex thing in the back end, and there's always something that could happen. And then we say use it with caution, but I think we're at a point now where you can use it to get credible results from this. And in case you notice some things doesn't feel or seem right, so please don't hesitate to contact. As with all technical systems, there's always the possibility of error, but we're at the point now where it's usable.
Great. You can go and visit the website, I guess. So
Yes.
also Jean-Sébastien is asking, is it possible to play with input data in the MICAT tool to simulate how policy measures should be designed to succeed in getting households out of energy poverty according to their income group? Probably yes, right?
I mean, we made it as flexible as possible, considering that the data we can obtain at a European level is limited to the extent that it needs to be harmonized in some ways. So therefore, the general idea is really to make it as adjustable for users as possible. So there's a lot of parameters that you can use yourself, you can adjust yourself to really match the conditions of the region or the area you want to implement the policy. You can't really distinguish the income groups. So it's more like can you hear me? Yeah. So it's the differentiation is the severity of energy poverty, but not distinguished according to the income group that the energy poor households belong to.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit more about what kind of major data gaps you encountered and identified during the development, maybe?
Yeah, I mentioned a little bit on the last slide, and to my well, I think the biggest data gap that we have is the lack of data on the energy efficiency rent premiums, which is I think a very relevant aspect when we want to assess what share of the benefits actually reach the households that they're intended to reach, right? So there's very little literature or empirical data on that. There's a very old study from 2013 on that, but for many countries, there's little information on the share of investment costs that are being passed on to tenants. So I'm not saying this will stay like that. I mean, this is the tool is work in progress, so we're always looking into the data gaps and try to fill them. But yeah, at the moment, it's much more data in the commercial sector than it is in the residential sector, and I think this is a data gap that should be addressed in the future. So
actually, I wrote that as like an additional question to you. So good that you went into that on the rents. Yes, I was wondering about that actually. Great. Somebody else has another question. Maybe I oversaw something also in the chat. Otherwise, maybe Antonia, another question maybe to you is also, so what do you think, what phase in the retrofitting process is more challenging? What came out already from your project experience? Is it more the design, the implementation, the maintenance, specific for cultural heritage buildings? Can you say something about that?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
The thing with cultural heritage is that it's always challenging because
Oh, yes.
There are also some legal constraints, and so things are getting harder when you have to deal with cultural heritage. But each phase, I would say that it's challenging. For example, during the design phase, we want to ensure that our proposed measures are aligned with the cultural heritage value, and they're well integrated in the sites. Then the implementation phase, there are some more practical challenges. For example, the financing of the retrofit project, the continuous inspection to adhere to the design principles, and then after the implementation, let's say, there are again constant inspections for maintenance, for optimal operation performance, and predictive maintenance. And within the Inherit project, we provide digital solutions that contribute to each phase. For the maintenance, for the preservation, for monitoring, decision support tools. Yeah.
Okay. So as I also understood, you also put some sensors in the buildings. Did you encounter some difficulties there that you want to share with us? Challenges?
Yeah, again, another challenge that we faced during the project, because of this sensitivity that there is behind the cultural heritage buildings. Some pilot sites had difficulties installing the sensors, so it was also hard for us to gather the needed data in order to assess the buildings. But we have developed this hub of measures that I said, that 83 measures have been collected within the Inherit project. And with this, we aim to let's say, implement these measures to the most related building site. And because some of the buildings might have a higher level of protection, some of others can make more adjustments, let's say, in order to become more modernized. And this is how we actually deal with the challenges. We apply these measures to the sites that fit the most.
Yeah. And I think this next question also in the chat is for you, Antonia. When you approach the renovation of buildings, do you take into account the principles of circular economy? Is it already of the new Bauhaus initiative as well? I think so, right?
Yes, it is also one of the pillars that we are assessing. Circularity. So
good.
Yes, but I don't know if what is exactly the question.
So if you're taking it generally into account, yeah.
If it's just in general questions, yes, we take into account.
And probably, if yes, how? Like what happens to the material afterwards, maybe if you can elaborate on that.
I can't.
What happened?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, what happens with the material after the renovation, with the old material and questions revolving about that.
I'm not sure that I can answer this question right now. I can come back to you with a written maybe answer when I ask the responsible partner, let's say, for this matter.
Yeah. And then there's another one from Mara, our coordinator. Antonia, would you suggest any improvements to the installation process and buildings based on lessons learned? For instance, how to improve the installation rate?
Okay. How to install the installation process in buildings. To be honest, again, these are just web tools, and there's no installation process. The only installation is for the sensors.
Yeah, got it.
If that's what's asked.
Yeah, exactly. That's what she means. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Maybe Akis, one last question also to you, because we are focusing on RENOVERTY in rural areas. I don't know if I overheard it, but how did you account in the dream model for the rural aspect? Or did you generally, specified it, and how did you incorporate this rurality aspect in the analysis?
Yes. Actually, this may go back to the RENOVERTY approach generally. We used insights from the update of the framework of rural energy poverty, and we identified barriers to the implementation of energy efficiency there. And among those, for example, were financial awareness, geographical barriers. So what we try to do is to actually communicate with pilot partners there, and also through the audits, through incorporating the local weather and climate data into account. What happens is that we already are taking into account several problems, like the poor state of the rural building stock. For example, if we took those energy efficiency measures and applied them in an urban area, maybe the results would be different, especially in the prioritization. Secondly, the measures we decided to test were based on the on the audits and on the special characteristics we identified. And the discussion around financial support and subsidization also comes from another barrier we identified. One of them was the lack of capital for many households, because even if they know the benefits, they don't have the capital to actually implement those measures. And then there was other awareness barriers that we wanted to address by providing this techno-economic analysis. And this is why we went with this scope of the household. We wanted to offer awareness on what can a household gain from implementing energy efficiency. And this is really important because, as it was mentioned in other presentations here, some households may have also other priorities. If we just go to them and talk about energy savings and emissions, maybe this is not enough because they may need other things.
Yeah. So upfront costs and subsidizing the upfront costs also very important. Okay, so we have 1 minute left. Is there another question? The speakers? Okay. I think then I would say thank you to all the speakers and everybody who supported also today and the webinar. So Roberta, Axel, Dimitris, Mara, and everybody, and also our consortium. Thank you to all speakers. It was very, very interesting. It was today a little bit more technical, but I think we learned a lot. And we would like to invite you to get in touch with us and stay tuned, especially for our RENOVERTY project, because in the next month, we're going to release our rural renovation roadmaps from all the pilots. So this is like the key tool and key outcome also of our project. And we hope we are keeping in touch with you all. Thank you very much. And Margarita, yes, the presentations will be available as well. Just give us a little bit of time. You will have it all in February, I think, or end of January. Perfect. Thank you so much.